excited for both of these. So the first one, we're going to talk about the school board, folks. That's such an important position here in the county, and we're going to talk with Sydney Thomas. And secondly, we're going to have John Budenseek on, who's running for Martin County Sheriff. But before I get into that, I want to thank my sponsors, all of you. I could not be on here without you. Indiantown Marine Center, you strive to provide customers with an efficient and user-friendly location for servicing and storing their vessels while maintaining cleanliness, environmental quality, and safety. Provide dockage, travel lifts, workspace, long-term storage space, and other repair maintenance services, as well as offering a convenient hurricane haul-out program. Indiantown Marine Center is a contractor yard and can provide a list of approved contractors that their customers can engage with no markup or gate fees. Customers are also welcome to bring their own contractor, provided that pre-approval is given before starting work. That's Indiantown Marine Center. Both Indiantown Marine Center and Indiantown Marina, right now is the time to reserve your space for hurricane storage, folks. It's coming, so call them today. Indiantown Marine Center, 772-597-0800, Indiantown Marine Center. FL.com. So in the studio, I have Sydney Thomas. Sydney, it's a pleasure to have you. Sydney was raised in the Midwest with those Midwestern values after moving to Northern California in 2001. She received 2 teaching credentials from California State University. Even as a new teacher, Sydney's expertise in implementing school-wide intervention plans led her creating multiple trainings and presentations for superintendents in her area and gave her valuable experience working with students in special education. After having her first child in 2009, Sydney moved to Stewart and had the privilege to stay at home and raise her children for the next 5 years. She returned to education in 2015 by working at Riverbend Academy, the Martin County School District, where she was nominated Teacher of the Year. She then moved into the role as a program specialist in the district. This role provided Sydney with exceptionally valuable experience that will cross over well into the role of a school board member. She worked with school and district leadership teams across all elementary schools and departments. Not only did she work phenomenally as part of her teams, but Sydney helped to revise and republish important documents used by Martin County teachers to this day. Additionally, working with the Student Service Department, this role granted Sydney access to important trainings and information on mental health and interventions for at-risk populations. While Sydney loved her educator position, she accepted a full-time marketing position with better pay and benefits, thereby leaving the field of education in 2020. Both of Sydney's children will attend the Martin County School District schools through graduation, so the quality of our public schools is of utmost importance to Sydney. She has still been active in the community as a PTSA secretary, volunteer for hospice and a humane society, strong advocate for public education, and recent chapter chair for nonprofit Hot Mess Express. I haven't heard of that one. She has attended countless school board meetings and helped chair multiple groups holding our educational institutions accountable for their decisions. Welcome, Sydney.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. It really is.
Well, I'm very excited about this position. Right now, the school board positions over the last 4 years have really become nationally a focus, and I'm very excited about your race because we truly have 2 diametric candidates where people really have 2 choices. So I appreciate you coming in here today and sharing a little bit about yourself. So, first off, why did you decide to throw your hat in the ring? Because here it is, it's politics and anything goes.
I never expected my life to go in this direction, that's for sure. But after paying so much attention to public education, especially, I've been an educator for years, so I was always involved, but getting a better understanding of the workings and just public education funding and all that, I just had a renewed passion for public education. And since my kids are in the district and I see us slipping and I'm passionate about it, and so I've made this decision to bring my expertise. I think having an educator on the board is going to better the relationship between the board and our educators, and I think we really need that. So I am excited to represent teachers and educators as a board member.
And folks, I want to remind you, during the Meet Your Candidate series, I can only take questions on Facebook Live. I do not take live phone calls. So I am watching the Facebook Live feed, and thank you so much, Sydney, because she's sharing her phone. I forgot mine. I appreciate that. Sydney, in the news headlines today, it was stated that Florida is now 50th in the nation for teacher pay. What is your stance on the local teacher pay? And this is a 2-part question. And secondly, what's the solution?
That is, we were, I think, 48th, so we were certainly abysmal at 48th, but now to be 50th is just it's shocking. And the states that we're comparable with aren't doing well with their public education systems either. So now that, as a school board member, I can't change the funding from the state, obviously, to school board, but
Right.
I can certainly advocate for us to pay our teachers as best as we possibly can. And I don't think that that's being done right now. And I think you get what you pay for. And so right now, with having such low pay, especially compared to the cost of living here, that we can't have the bar raised extremely high for our teachers, so to say. So if we were to have exceptional pay, we could attract better candidates, and we could perform better as a school district. But as a school board member, you also do have opportunities to advocate at the state level for funding and teacher salaries. And I don't know that that's happening with our existing school board, and so I would be passionate about that.
That is a really tough issue, and you're absolutely right. The pay is the higher the pay, the higher the quality candidate you get. So it's a tough thing here in Florida. Going back to the race for a second, Dr. Millay joined the race.
Yeah.
You were in the race already. You pulled back to support Dr. Millay. You're back in the race because we all know what happened. Dr. Millay went back to withdrew, let's say, because he has a full-time job with the Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah.
There's another popular person from the school that's out there that is contemplating running that was in the district. If that should happen, so we know where you stand today. Are you going to stay in the race, or are you going to look at the other candidate as you did with Dr. Millay and say, I need to put my support behind one person?
I will stay in the race. I'm committed to this. My experience is great for this role as a school board member. I would be able to advocate for all of our students and our educators and our teachers, and I know that I have the educator support. So I almost feel like an obligation at this point to stay. The reason that I was going to back down is because I think Millay would have been a phenomenal school board member, and I didn't want to split the vote and risk one of us not winning. And so even though that's not what I wanted on a personal level, I wanted to do what was best for our teachers and our students and our community. And so I was willing to step back. Lucky for me, like the one time in my life where being a procrastinator came to my advantage, and so I was able to hop back in. But at this point, I'm in it.
Okay, that's what we wanted to know. It was one of those really quick, in and out for Dr. Millay. So
Yeah,
and
it's unfortunate. It's sequence of events.
it's just one of it's one of those things where everybody has to decide what's best, and that's what happened. So, Sydney, and just so everybody knows, you are running for Marsha Powers' school board seat, and this is where I love getting into kind of the subject matter, because you guys are diametrically opposed on a lot of issues. So, Sydney, you had the honor of helping to chair Connected Martin Education, Free to Be Florida's Martin Chapter, Defense of Democracy Florida, and the local Stop Moms for Liberty chapter. So, I looked at those, and I have a daughter in school as well, and I'm like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of groups out there. So
Yeah.
I just want to give a little rundown to the listeners of what the groups are, and then tell us why you felt it important to really get involved with these groups and get the message out to other residents here in the community, because at the end of the day, I have a daughter, by the way, same age as yours. I don't know if you're 2009 child. I don't know if it's a son or daughter, but that was my first as well. And she'll be going to Clark here in the fall. So,
great.
The school education is of utmost importance to us. But the first one, you all have heard of this, and Sydney was not involved with this one, but Mothers for Liberty. I think this is what kickstarted a lot of other groups. Moms for Liberty is dedicated to fighting for the survival of America by unifying, educating, and empowering parents to defend their parental rights at all levels of government. Sydney, Connected Martin of Education. Connected Martin of Education is a group of local community members, educators, parents, and students who advocate for quality public education for all students in Martin County. You can find them on Facebook, and the group has grown to a membership of over 140 members. You also help co-chair Defense of Democracy. It educates the public about the value of inclusivity and the importance of emotional and physical safety for all individuals within the American public school and library systems. They support educators who presently, historically, and scientifically accurate information, and encourage initiatives that enhance Americans' shared experience regardless of race, color, national origin, language, gender, sex, sexual orientation, sexual orientation, sexual identity, religion, or ability. Free to Be Florida is a statewide coalition of parents, teachers, students, and public interest organizations who believe Florida's children deserve a safe learning environment free from government overreach and censorship. Free to Be Florida seeks to end educational censorship in Florida, particularly efforts targeting Black, Brown, and LGBTQ plus communities, build support network to counter censorship strategies, effectuate statewide anti-censorship strategies, and include as well as uplift the voices of impacted communities. The Free to Be Florida Coalition seeks to not only build community engagement to fight back against censorship and discrimination in Florida, but also bring individuals and groups together across the state to collaborate and effectuate statewide strategies. And Stop Moms for Liberty. They attempted, this is from their page, the attempted takeover of Mothers for Liberty, a fear-mongering, dark money-connected nonprofit, is discriminatory and designed to inject far-right Christian nationalism into what is supposed to be an inclusive, neutral, and safe space for all children and teachers. Underserved communities are targeted by Mothers for Liberty accusations and insults. We stand united to support all students, families, and teachers without exception. We understand that when Mothers for Liberty claims they are a parents' rights organization, that they have made it abundantly clear that they only mean some parents. Mothers for Liberty push towards tax dollars being used for private education is also unfolding across the country. Elected officials in some states are complicit in often nefarious actions of the Mother for Liberty group, connecting legislation that is both discriminatory and revengeful. Plans to try to control the teaching of history are beyond frightening. By questioning books, a small number of loud voices are inundating districts with review quests, which creates insurmountable amounts of work for our already overburdened educators. Book banning is a strategy used throughout history to silence voices. Our children deserve to have a variety of reading experiences without opinionated oversight. The mission of Stop Moms for Liberty is to connect the resistance across our nation so that we can support each other in the quest to save our public school system. There is strength in numbers and effectiveness in organizing. So I wanted to give people a background on what all these different organizations are. There's a lot of them out there. You clearly are passionate because you got involved to chair these latter organizations. And I think, Sydney, Martin County, South Florida in particular, is kind of a microcosm of what's happening nationally. And that's what you're bringing here kind of to the table, right? It's these two different groups. The book banning is one group. I mean, it's censorship banning, however you want to call it. But those are issues that are very passionate amongst the public. So I'm going to turn this back over to you and ask you more questions about that. But those were groups that
that I worked with. And so to clarify, with all those groups, they're all nonpartisan. They're all focused specifically on public education. I've stepped back from all of them to focus on this race in particular. So, and I'd stepped back from a few of them previous to that. And a lot of what it was, like the Stop Moms for Liberty, was helping to chair their Facebook page, basically. It was just moderating their Facebook page. And again, connecting the community members with other community members to have a better understanding on what's happening in public education. A lot of it is communication based. Yeah.
And with that, so let's go back. The book banning is probably one of the biggest issues here locally. What is your stance on what's happening there with the school? What would you do differently if you were, if anything, if you were elected to the school board?
Sure. So I know that there are people out there that are saying that I want porn in our schools, that I support porn in our schools, and it's wild. So I don't know. Have you looked over the list of books that were removed?
I did, and there's some of them are right, and some of them were more age appropriate. And I'm glad you said that. I had a bunch of quotes that they put out, and I'm only going to read one, and I'll bleep myself. But you kill me. So now my mental images of her naked body filled me with horror. Big, hairy bleep and 8-inch bleep. Flat, hairy chest and hairy back. And I kissed her. No, not her, him. That's from Almost Perfect. That was a book that was removed.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a bunch of them, and I'm not even going to read the rest.
What I would put good money on is that there's about 4 to 5 books where if you were to have a conversation with someone that supports all of these removals and bans, that they bring up quotes, Almost Perfect being one of them, but they bring up quotes in certain books repeatedly, right? It's this repeated message. We have like 5 books where I think it's very reasonable conversation, and Connected Martin always did as well. And I'm not with them anymore, but Connected Martin always understood, like we never looked at all of the books and said, absolutely this should be on every shelf of every school. No, like there are really reasonable conversations that need to happen about some of those books, specifically the 5 that you hear about over and over and over again. But while you have these 5 where it is sometimes eye-raising and you do have to step back and think, is this appropriate to be in a school? With those 5 being the focus, then another, 100 get taken out in a landslide behind them. Books from Toni Morrison. I've had so many community members tell me that a lot of these books that were removed were required readings for their courses, their AP courses back when they were students. So, and I know that the challengers, they haven't read these books, but the educators did, and the media specialists did. And those are our trained professionals that know what the guidelines are, the rules. In our district, the educators, which I trust, we're talking master's level, PhD levels, they have book clubs, unpaid book clubs about all of this stuff because they're passionate about it on their personal time, like new pedagogy and education. They're passionate. And they came to the table after reviewing all of these books and they thought, well, maybe 1 or 2, yeah, let's remove them. But the rest of them, we think that these are acceptable and fine. And their opinions as professional educators weren't trusted, and the books were removed anyway. And that's how we've landed in this position. It's just a complete overreach, and it's not parental rights, because we do have the Destiny system, which has an option for every parent to go in there and remove any book from being able to be checked out by their own child. And so it's just ironic to say that it's parental choice, but you've removed parental choice from a lot of families. And the reason that people use the word ban, and I'm fine with using removed, but I think that it's important to understand that banning is because a lot of these families, specifically from low socioeconomic backgrounds, they're not going to Barnes and Nobles, they're not going to Amazon, they're not going to the public library. Maybe they don't have access, like a car or time if they're working multiple positions to pay their bills. And so the public library is really their only access to literature. And so that's why it's, for some families, it is more of a ban than a removal.
Okay, and I'm glad you clarified that, because I'm with you on that. I'm like, it's really not banned because you can still get it in other locations, but you've just explained not that you believe
But
that all
also
students
in
can
our
get
history,
there.
that's never gone well, restricting literature. And I've read a lot of the books on that list, and some of them have absolutely zero sexual contact in them at all, not even a kiss.
So let's talk about the James Pattison. That was something that was a national news story because the author came out and said, my books are being banned in Martin County. Those particular books were not banned. They were put into a more age-appropriate level. If you go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble, they rate them for middle school, high school students. So the board had taken them from the elementary schools, taken them from the younger readers, and said it's more appropriate for middle school. And there was still an outburst, an outlash against that, or backlash, I should say. Where would you stand on let's take those books in particular, because they weren't removed from the school system, just a certain age group?
Right. So I have not read that series in particular, so I can't really speak to it. But I would say that on both sides of the issue, that there's like miscommunication and extremist messaging that goes on. So, if they were to, let's say, remove some Toni Morrison books from the middle school libraries, but keep them in the high school libraries, given what some of the content and some of the passages are, I think that that's a reasonable conversation to have. But then, if that were to be the case, and then everybody's, flipping tables because they think that they've been banned from everywhere, but in fact they're in the high schools, that's a different conversation.
Very good. Jules Hicks, book removals of inappropriate materials that violate state statutes. These masters don't even know how to do a simple weeding of their libraries, and they do not want books removed, including the one Casey just read. So I want to talk a little bit more about the book banning. We're running out of time. But
that's actually one of the least things that I am focused on, to be honest.
Okay.
I'm very dialed into the educators in Martin County because I work so closely with them, both at the admin level and also teachers themselves. And while I think majority of educators are on the same page that this is an overreach, in terms of their day-to-day lives, this is the last thing on their mind. They are running around underpaid, undervalued, underrespected. They have a poor relationship with our existing board. and they're putting out fires, and they're desperately trying to educate students. And while they do have passionate feelings about the book removals and the book banning for sure, in terms of them clocking in and clocking out and what they're doing day to day, with the exception of people that have had to go through and catalog, and that has been exhausting, and that's been a waste of resources as well, in my opinion. This is just not heavy hitting on the everyday educator and what they're dealing with.
Sydney, I want you to know, and for all candidates that are out there, after the qualifying period, which is around June 20th, it's around that day, I don't know if it's that exact day, I'm going to host another hour for every candidate that's qualified, so we can really get into these topics. I feel bad because a half hour goes so quickly, and it really does, and we don't get into all the topics as deeply as we need to.
Yeah.
So please know that that's coming up. You qualify, I'm going to invite you back, and we'll have a whole hour.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
Absolutely, because the teacher pay is very important, and you just talked about relationships, and those things are very important. The book banning, I bring that up because the community has just been,
We made
hugely,
national news
a
couple times.
We did, Martin
and
County.
It's still going on, and I think it's a missed opportunity for our school board to improve relationships between the board and our teachers and educators, and the board and our community. And there's no other issue where people are showing up every single meeting to talk about, and they're not doing or saying anything, and some of these books should not have been removed.
One of the interesting things I think with the books is not one of them has come back formally to the board for review to bring back. I find that, as a board member, what are you supposed to do if that process is not brought forward to a book?
I think we have to wonder why. And I think that it would be naive of everyone to think that every conversation that has happened between school board members and district professionals is at a board meeting or subject to the public records request. The string of events that you can see is that very clearly that our educators, our PhD and master's level educators, our media specialists who are specifically trained in these issues, they had recommendations that were not followed. At some point, that chain of trust was broken. And while it hasn't reached the board, I am not of the thought that they didn't have anything to do with it.
We only got a minute left. Title IX. That's certainly a big issue as well nationwide. Do you believe that, how do you believe sexual identity should be identified in sports?
Well, it doesn't matter what I believe. What we need to do as a district is we need to follow the law, and we need to protect our funding. And if we were to, with Title IX, it operates differently than something like Title I. So, like Sarasota yesterday voted a resolution not to change their policy to fit the new federal guidelines. We, as a district, would open ourselves up to a very, very expensive lawsuit if we aren't following the law. And so really, as a school board member, that's my job, is to follow the law, whether I agree with it or not.
Sydney Thomas, she's running for Martin County School Board. Sydney, I hope to have you back here after qualifying period. I wish we could have gotten into this topics a lot deeper. There's so much to go on. Appreciate you putting yourself out there and running.
I appreciate the time.
It's my pleasure, and it's fantastic to talk to you. This is what it's about. It gives voters a choice. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure.